You know what worked great while we were in Nashville? My Mint Mobile cell service, because it works great nationwide.
After years of getting ripped off by big wireless providers, there's finally a better option. Mint Mobile is the affordable premium wireless service that you buy online. To get your new phone plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/AL.
Astonishing Legends would like to thank Squarespace, Mint Mobile, Purple, Best Fiends, Wondrium, Upstart, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
The term disclosure has undoubtedly become more and more prevalent over the past several years, and we're betting that most of our listeners only think of one thing when they consider that word these days: UFOs, or the more recently rebranded UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. We've had more than a few discussions about disclosure as it relates to the big picture on our show, especially since the now infamous front page story with the words "Real UFOs" appeared above the fold on the December 17, 2017 edition of the New York Times. It's hard to believe our show on that issue is now nearly 4 years old. What has happened since then? In some ways, not much at all. In others, a lot. There's not been a high volume of information, but what information has come out has been at least a little bit revelatory. We use that word, revelatory, because it's in the Merriam-Webster definition of disclosure: divulgence, exposure, revelation. Unfortunately, the revelations aren't connected so much as to what UAP might be, but more towards how the United States government has been taking the reports and sightings of them a lot more seriously than you thought, and for a lot longer than you thought. After all these years of stark denial and attempts to convince everyone who entertained the notion of little green men as foolish, now the US government is admitting there's something they don't understand. But it turns out that there's even less information connecting UAP to aliens or life from somewhere else than there is evidence of the craft themselves. The Times laid bare that the US military had indeed spent millions coalescing the details of multiple encounters between high-ranking military personnel and unknown aerial vehicles. Vehicles that seemed to defy physics, simply choosing to be in the places they wanted to be in, without regard for the rules of time and space. The most sophisticated technology available backs up these stories, with redundant systems corroborating everything observed by humans in most cases. Did we mention that these crafts seem to be able to do all the same things underwater as well? Along the way, one particular man seemed to be the go-to source for video clips from these encounters. That man, Jeremy Corbell, has appeared on every major television network and the Joe Rogan Show to discuss the clips, their origins, and what they may contain. As you can imagine, his paranormal experience is not limited to military encounters with UAP. His mentor is George Knapp, the investigative journalist at the center of a multitude of stories that we've touched on over the years, including Skinwalker Ranch. As a filmmaker, Jeremy has directed and produced a fascinating documentary on a man who claims to have worked on alien propulsion systems at Site S4 outside of Area 51, Bob Lazar. Jeremy and a mutual friend of Astonishing Legends, Adam, have also investigated some cattle mutilations together. How does everything connect? It seems the further you look into all these kinds of mysteries, the more questions you have.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Jeremy Corbell.
I released something the world has never seen before, which is corroborative sensor data tied to FLIR visual data, which was the radar screen from inside the CIC, which is the Combat Information Center, a classified room, all this stuff, but I was legally able to do it because I obtained everything and it was inherently unclassified because it was a navigation radar.
Join us tonight as we sit down with Jeremy Corbell and our mutual friend Adam to discuss what it's like being one of the most visible UFO investigators working right now.
And we're back.
That we are, folks.
Oh, wait, hold on. I had a gag for that. Hold on. And we're back. Wait, no, I was gonna say. Sorry.
Are you? Do you want to let me in on the gag? Because I don't know what you're doing.
No,
Okay.
there's no gag. That's
okay.
I can't. We're not doing it because I can't remember.
Okay,
There was
gotcha.
something, but it had to do with something that we're doing tonight. But
Okay.
Here we go. And we're back.
That we are, folks. And wow, the past couple of weeks have been amazing for us.
Yes, it was a whirlwind, man. That's for sure.
We just got back from Nashville, where we had our whole team for Podcast Movement, which is a convention for podcasters. That was a lot of fun. It was actually the first time ever that all 5 of our core members have been together and had all met each other even. We have never, all 5 of us. I mean, I'd met different members of them in different places, but that was the first time all 5 of us have been in the same place. So that was actually a lot of fun. It was like a retreat. I loved it.
Yes, it was magic. And on top of that, we had a fabulous meetup along with our friends Adam and Matt from Graveyard Tales for about 100 listeners at the Pharmacy Burger Parlor and Beer Garden. And that was a ton of fun. We'd really like to thank everyone who came out for that. And you know who you are. But we really, really appreciated the show of support, and it was great meeting all of you and getting to talk to a lot of you and hearing your personal stories, so sincere thanks for that.
With possible pending lockdowns on the horizon again, we're glad we got that one squeezed in under the wire, and here's hoping we can have another meetup in the not-too-distant future.
Also, folks, if you were missing us the past few weeks or just want to hear me at least in a little bit of a different environment, you've got to check out my recent hop across the pond to one of our favorite shows, The Lorebin, our English-British cousins. It was a really fun and fantastic conversation like you would have over a couple of pints, and these guys are hilarious. Well, they're comedians. They made me laugh a lot. And I was just on episode 75 of their show, which dropped on August 4th, to discuss the soap woman of Lake Crescent.
The who of what?
The soap lady. Come on, you know the soap lady, right?
Right, the soap lady.
Yeah.
Look, folks, the Loremen do have a great show, somewhat in the vein of Astonishing Legends, but a lot funnier. And when Forrest is on there, even he is funny. So get over there and check it out. We'll have a link to that episode in our show notes.
And if you still can't get enough of me, I also recently spent a good while talking with our friend Bradley Netherton and his co-host Robert over at their podcast called Kolchak's Loop about a lot of stuff and only minimally about Kolchak. We talked about Stephen King, horror movies, our favorite elements of all those kinds of things, neurology. We always have a lot of fun talking about those kinds of things, and so we just let it roll. And but we do talk about Kolchak a little bit. It was supposed to be about the shapeshifters Skinwalker type episode with Richard Keel. Remember him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Kolchak's Loop is centered in discussion around all things Kolchak, the main character from the cult classic TV show Kolchak the Night Stalker. You can find this show wherever you get your podcasts, of course. Oh, and Rich Haddam has been on it as well, so dig through that back catalog. He's obsessed with Kolchak. Yeah,
Rich is on there for 2 episodes, I believe.
Yeah.
And a lot of really fascinating guests that Bradley manages to get. And a friend of mine have been watching all the Kolchaks, so this is especially enlightening.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, let's kick the tires and light the fires.
But wait, there's one more place, one more show we need to mention. We cannot leave out the podfather of all paranormal podfathers.
Of course, Jim.
That's right, folks. We also recently sat down with our very good friend and the man who inspired us to get into podcasting, Jim Harold, over at the Paranormal Podcast. We had a blast talking to him. He posted that back on August 3rd, so look for that, say it with me, wherever you get your podcasts.
So we have 2 guests on the show tonight. One is our good friend Adam, who's been a longtime listener and is fascinated with all things astonishing. And he's had quite a few interesting encounters over the years, and you'll hear about some of them tonight. Our second guest is Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell. And this guy's an artist, okay? He's a filmmaker, photographer, and on top of that, he does home renovations. He's done it all. He loves to flip houses, he and his wife. He's a definite Renaissance man. And part of the reason we wanted to have him on tonight is that he's become the de facto clearinghouse for some of the most extraordinary UFO/UAP military footage the world has ever seen. And he takes the job of vetting it while fervently protecting his sources very, very seriously, which we highly respect. He has extensive experience investigating UAP for decades now, and he is closely connected to his mentor, journalist and author George Knapp, who co-wrote Hunt for the Skinwalker and Dreamland about Bob Lazar.
We are so very fortunate to have been able to sit down with both Jeremy and Adam for 2 hours to ask them pretty much whatever we wanted, and the answers were candid. Not for nothing, but I actually really want to know a lot more about Bob Lazar now, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, man. Me too.
All right, Sarah, let's roll our discussion with Jeremy and Adam.
Well, Jeremy and Adam, welcome to Astonishing Legends. We're
Hello.
very excited to have you. Yeah. And first off, we'd like to thank longtime listener Adam for facilitating this interview with Jeremy and also agreeing to participate in our roundtable discussions.
Certainly welcome.
Thank you so much. And we're going to talk about what Adam and Jeremy have investigated together, what brought them together, the case that made them join forces in more detail a little later on. But first off, Adam, how did you come across Astonishing Legends? And then how did you two get acquainted, you and Jeremy?
I think I looked up paranormal podcast.
Well, I'm glad we're coming up in the search results. Yeah.
I liked the icon. You know, you guys have great artwork and stuff.
Thank you.
I basically just kind of dove in and I listened to a little bit of the current episode. I can't remember what it was at the time. It was a couple of years ago, but I heard enough, and
Neither can we.
I immediately paused that one and started from the beginning. What ended up happening was you guys had done a episode with Chuck Zukowski about the cattle mutilation phenomenon, and I had always been kind of interested in that. And overall, I watched Unsolved Mysteries a lot as a kid, stuff like that. Me and my dad, our thing used to be the X-Files for sure. Cut to maybe 6 months later, and I was taking my son out to shoot his BB gun for the first time. We were going to go try to shoot a rabbit because we're rednecks like that. Don't worry, we ate it too.
Okay, good.
So he's got his BB gun, and we're out there at this place that we sort of lease. I guess my dad has leased it. He used to have a oil field business out there, and that was the headquarters, and it's an old abandoned zinc plant. And we found a cattle mutilation. So this is kind of the abridged version right now, but we found this cow, and I wasn't sure what to do about it. So I looked up that Chuck Zukowski guy. I sent him an email about it, and he said, "Great, give me the location." So I did, and that was the end of that until I heard Jeremy Corbell on a different podcast, actually, with Ryan Sprague, and he was talking about the Skinwalker Ranch thing, and so I think he just recently released the movie Hunt for the Skinwalker at that time. So I went home and bought it on Amazon, and I'm getting through the movie, and all of a sudden they do this freeze frame on the cow skin, and it was very reminiscent of what I found out there at the shop. So I emailed him, and he called me, and I was at Walmart, and I pretty much talked to him the whole time I was walking around Walmart with my wife. My wife was a little bit confused about why I wasn't helping with anything, but I was pretty excited. So that's pretty much what happened, and the rest is kind of history. We've been talking about weird stuff ever since.
So how long ago was that?
So it was in April 2019. I didn't find out about Jeremy until July. So by the time I made it back out there to sort of take a second look at it, cut a piece off, I cut some of the hide that had been cut with the instrument because I wanted to measure. There were serration marks, and I wanted to measure the distance between them. And so that was in July. And so it had been further degraded by that point. But the pictures that I sent you guys are from the day that I actually found it in April. But yeah. So 2019, the cow is in many different pieces now. It's finally almost completely melted into the ground by this point.
I just watched Hunt for Skinwalker for the second or third time last night, and it's amazingly very similar to the serrated edge of the cut marks there. And
yeah.
I could see where you'd key in on that. Like, there's something going on here. Is this the same tool?
I mean, I paused the movie right then and started screaming for my family to come in and look at the television screen because it was uncanny. And when I found it laying out there, I just thought, wow, how cool is that? But when I saw the movie and that thing flashed across, that was when the hair stood up on the back of my neck for the first time.
You guys have been actually talking a lot since then. New developments and things you're both finding out on your own. So Jeremy, let's start with you. Did it strike you as that there's some kind of connection and I got to talk to Adam about this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't think anything bonds you more than looking up the rectum of a dead animal together. So I just figured that would be a great experience to have with Adam.
Scott and I have often said that, but we've just never done it. Yeah.
You're right. At the time that it was going on, it was about the time where I had released this film, Hunt for the Skinwalker. I think it's on Hulu. And it was a time when I was kind of confronted with this reality that there appears to be some sort of connection between the UFO topic and these mutilations. And that's just by witness reports. I mean, you can't ignore what people tell you over decades. The thing that fascinated me, and still does to this day, these are surgical cuts. I mean, this is not a natural death. There's no version of reality where this is a natural death. So the idea that I could, meet a new friend and wow, he really just genuinely found this and doesn't know what to do. It was kind of, for me, the first time I got to witness this for myself. So I thought, how cool, this guy really wants to know the truth, as you probably can tell. Adam's a super genuine person. And it's like, I think his enthusiasm for just finding out the truth, despite all of the things that could prevent that, from religious belief to just, the fear of it, it was just kind of very genuine. And so, yeah, Adam and I became good friends over time. And we do talk about weird stuff all the time now, because life is weird. The things that are happening are unexplained. And it is my self-proclaimed job, to investigate the unexplained and not explain the uninvestigated, as George Knapp says.
You end up in a position where you feel like it's become my job to tell the public. This needs to be known because it involves all of us. It affects all of us on this planet. So somebody should be telling everybody about this as much as is allowed. And so let's back up and talk about how you first got involved with this, Jeremy, and what drew you to the paranormal, to want to be a filmmaker, to want to cover these things. Well, first of all, I'm just kind of very impressed. You have a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And you were working with youth groups in providing training for them and a hand up. And then you studied something in college here in California. Is that correct?
Yeah. I went to University of Santa Cruz, and my whole life is not how I expected it to be.
Right.
I started training jiu-jitsu when I was 9 years old. And at the time, to train MMA, you had to go to boxing class, wrestling class, judo class, jiu-jitsu class. It was very fragmented. But over the years, when I was young, starting at 9 years old, it was like the one thing I was good at. I get to punch people and not get in trouble. That was really the reason I liked it. Obviously, the reason you start is not the reason you stay. It really changed me as a human being. It allowed me to understand, mechanics and how words are words, but actions are actions. So that was really my trajectory that I saw going, forever. And I went to UC Santa Cruz. I think I took modern dance. I was not serious about school. The thing is that when you're in that environment, basically I got a free dojo. I got a free place to teach and to train. And for me, it was always about learning and about studying and bettering my own technique. But I found that by teaching jiu-jitsu, it bettered me 100 times fold every week. So it was almost like the teaching thing was really so I could be a better learner. And it's the same thing with UFOs. I could just study it and never broadcast anything, never say anything, never make movies, never report on anything, and just not take all the flack, But I've found that by doing so, I learn more. So really the consequence of being so curious is that you put things out there because it then feeds back in that loop to you understanding more. So the transition between martial athlete to actually artist, because I had a stint in LA where I can't even draw a stick figure, but I had a really good art career. And then all of a sudden it just transformed into, you're filming me for art, and that is so much cooler than what I'm doing. Will you teach me how to use a camera? That was it. The second I pointed a camera at somebody, I realized the camera was my passport into the secrets that people hold. It was so different. The second you point a camera at someone, they become different and they really let it out. And so that was really that transition. I just got really sick. I couldn't do jiu-jitsu anymore. And so I started making films, but I wasn't a filmmaker yet. I started making them. I had never put anything out.
Well, what was the degree in quantum studies? Is that the title of the degree? What does that involve?
Yeah, so at the University of Santa Cruz, you pay for your education at universities. I was paying out of pocket, and I wanted to bring together the things that most interested me. I did study physics, and I studied quantum physics, but I also studied philosophy and anthropology, actually, very strangely. So what happened is they allowed me to generate my own major because I was paying for it. It was actually more rigorous than just taking one of the paths they already created. I had to have 4 professors on the board, and they all had to sign off. And it was essentially the philosophy that we find within the physics of the microcosm. That's the best way I can explain it. And look, it was really fun. It just allowed me to study what I wanted to at the university. And I think that process of knowing you can do what you want, that was really neat.
What inspired you about things that were starting to lean more towards the paranormal? Cattle mutilations, UFOs, things like that.
I don't know if they're paranormal because I don't really know what that word means. They're abnormal, that's for sure. But I think maybe the word paranormal, maybe it just means things that we haven't really understood yet. So I came from a place of a really nuts and bolts position. And that's because of my martial arts career. It's like you can philosophize all day, but you get in a ring and you start throwing punches. The person, especially if they're bigger than you, the smaller person, let's say with the better technique, you're going to be dominant and superior and you're going to win. Someone's going to be choked out, knocked out, or unconscious. So that was, for me, this lesson that if the mechanics of things are important, and if you dedicate yourself to the mechanics of things, in life, then it's really hard to not succeed because you're either going to learn the lesson or you're not, but it's hard to not succeed. So when we talk about these mysteries, there may be a great, simple explanation for them. We just are uneducated at this point on what that is. You remember, bacteria was magical before, we had the microscope. So I'm thinking the UFO phenomenon and all its associated phenomena, there may be very clear if we could start to understand them. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, I was at the grocery store a couple of nights ago, and as I was approaching the checkout, one of the grocery baggers was telling the cashier how she loved to discuss ghosts and supernatural stuff with one of her coworkers.
No way.
Yeah, right? So then, of course, I mentioned to her that she should check out our podcast, but then she told me she had never listened to a podcast before and didn't know how to find them. So you know what I did then?
I bet you took out your iPhone, you played an entire episode for her right there while you were checking out.
No. I thought if someone had a product they sold or a service they provided or even their podcast, et cetera, now would be the perfect time to tell them about your website, and specifically your website you made on Squarespace.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah, because if you meet someone in passing and they express an interest in what you're doing, you don't have to tell them, see my handcrafted whatnots for sale at shopsy.co.ca or UK/ not going to remember this. Come on, that's lame.
You're exactly right, my friend. What you should be telling them, nay, what you need to be telling them is go check out all my stuff at, then, insert your own name here or business name or, some funny and clever, memorable name. And then here's the other cool part. You get to choose from over 200 specific and creative extensions that Squarespace has to offer, like .art or .band or even .beer.
Oh, .beer is so you, dude.
It is.
Well, this is not all Squarespace has to offer someone who has something to offer the world. But if you want to be successful, you need to understand why your visitors are there and how to keep them engaged and buying. And that's where Squarespace's analytics tools come in.
Yep, you can gain powerful insights about your site's visitors and how they interact with your content. You can learn more about the amount of time spent on your site and what people looked at the most, the geography of your audience, and more. And if you're selling, things like their purchase funnel and abandoned cart analytics will give you the feedback you need to know about what's working and what isn't and how to improve. So grow that brand, baby.
It is all about your brand these days, no matter what you do. So stop piggybacking onto someone else's to showcase your stuff.
And the best way to do that is to head on over to squarespace.com/legends for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
That's squarespace.com/legends and offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Man, podcast movement was a blast. We met so many cool people, visited a lot of fun places in Nashville, had some hot chicken, banked a ton of great memories, which you may have noticed because I posted them as they happened. But I also noticed, man, you didn't post much stuff online.
Well, no, not while we were out and about, because I have to admit, and you won't get this as much as me, but I used to suffer from mobile data PTSD, but I'm working on getting over it.
You're right. I don't quite get what you mean.
So, back in the old days of my old and bloated wireless provider's plan, I paid way too much for a super paltry and meager data plan and was limited to how many texts I could send, and how long I could talk, and how many photos and videos I could share and receive. And if I went over that without knowing, bam, I just got dinged $20 and I wasn't even aware of it.
Oh, yeah. I do know what you're talking about now. And I hear you, brother. With my situation back in the old days, it was super expensive to pay for a family plan that didn't make me the data Grinch or minutes miser. But we don't have to worry about any of that now because Mint Mobile has us covered with their premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month.
Oh, yeah. Seeing that Mint Mobile text at the beginning of the month that I've got a full tank of unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network, benefits all Mint Mobile plans come with, well, it just makes me smile because I don't have to live in fear of going over anymore or waiting until I found Wi-Fi to share and download. It's quite an experience to live in fear.
Yes, it is, Roy. But that's Mint Mobile's secret sauce. There's no fine print in the contract that gouges and rips you off like the big wireless companies love to do. There's no catch. Mint Mobile can do this because they sell wireless service online only.
Yep, there's no sour with this sweet deal. My call quality is as good or better than before, and the signal strength in my own apartment even improved. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month and start experiencing fearless mobile summer fun.
To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AL.
Hi, I'm Mike, and if you don't play this segue, Mothman will break my legs. Now back to the show.
In your project, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, which I just loved from start to finish. I thought it was amazing. I found that he was super compelling. It's weird because I think people think with Forrest and I think they think that we have knowledge on all of these, especially he's a big deal on all this stuff, but there's some things where it's a black hole until you go to look at it. And I like to not know anything until I go to dive, like nothing. And I didn't know a whole lot about Bob. I knew some people thought he was lying. Other people thought it was real. And I was like, your film was the absolute best way to dive into that.
Thank you.
I found him very, very compelling. And one of the things that I was going to say about how it was put together, because it reminded me of times that we have talked to folks like Bob Gimlin. We certainly didn't make a film about him, but we went and talked to him in person about the Patterson-Gimlin film. And you only need to spend 10 minutes with him to know that he believes everything he is saying. And this is a very real and genuine person. And that's how I felt about Bob. But also, my dad is an engineer. There's some similarities in their personalities that just kind of like nerding out. This is my dad walked out of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's like, it's too ridiculous. Like that's where my dad is. And I was like, oh, this guy is he's like, and I don't care if you believe me. I really thought that was compelling. And the other thing that I liked about it was how, because this made me think of too, we covered Dyatlov Pass a while back when we were first starting out. And our show on that was rooted in a book that we had read by Donnie Eichar called Dead Mountain, which is an amazing book about Dyatlov Pass. But one of the things that Eichar brought to that book was the humanity of those kids that disappeared. And I felt like you did a good job of doing that for Bob and making him into a person, because we see that over and over and over again. Everybody's like, oh, it's a hoax. This guy's lying. That's stupid. They just want to make money. They were selling tours to the house at Kelly Hopkinsville. They were doing this. They were doing. It's like, first of all, no one is making money. Everyone's getting harassed. They're getting made fun of. It's like coming out about this stuff. There's no reward to it. There isn't one. Even if the people didn't know that when they started. So I thought you did a really good job of portraying that about Bob. And the whole reason I even got to that, I went off on a rant here, but because when you said about bacteria, it made me think about how Bob said, taking, I can't remember what, something back to the Victorian age.
Yeah, he said two things, nuclear reactor.
Yeah, it was a nuclear reactor. And then they would open it up and they would all die. And and everyone that came to check on the people that died would die. And then everyone would be like, it's magic, get away from it. And that seems like it is what's happening now in these outer realms or whatever.
I'm really glad the movie had that effect on you because, I wasn't trying to prove Bob's case. I feel no need to do that. It was more you can dehumanize the messenger and you can dismiss the message. So if I could just show people Bob was a person, that's all I wanted to know initially is like, does he believe what he's saying, right?
Yes.
Or is he a known liar? So just to give you something beautiful to watch that doesn't try to prove to you, but takes you through the person's life. He's making coffee. It's a magic bullet. People have to start like, okay, well, now I got to make up my own mind instead of like reading on the internet. And so that was kind of cool. I'm glad it had that effect. And now there's two versions of reality. One is where you look at somebody and you say, well, they believe what they're saying. And that is a big step. Like you get to that point where you're like, well, they believe what they're saying. And that is a leap. That's an important leap. But then there's an extra kind of level where when things start becoming corroborated that are just over durationally, over time, in ways you least suspect, that's when you have to start considering that not only does he believe what he's saying, but what he's saying might be actual reality and true. And so that's like the next level of understanding of that case.
Again, there's parallels there for us with Bob Gimlin, the Patterson-Gimlin film, because when we talked to him, I was like, okay, he's not lying. So then the next thing is like, okay, was he tricked? Was he tricked? He wasn't in on it. You go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it seems like, no, it doesn't seem like he was tricked. And then you're like, okay, now you're at that world at the end of it where you are like with Bob taking 75 polygraph tests and passing all of them. It's like,
well, he took 4.
I know, but it's a lot. 4, 75, same thing.
Yeah, I'm surprised you knew that, Jeremy.
I knew it was 4, but I like to exaggerate.
Normally when I bring up Bigfoot, Jeremy kind of takes the track of,
Oh, I thought you were talking about Bob. I don't know. Gimlin took 75?
No. I was talking about Bob. Yes.
Okay. When Adam talks to me about Bigfoot, I'm like, don't know, bro. Don't know.
We didn't know either until we looked into that film. But like, I don't want to sidetrack on that. We did like a 5-year-long series on it. But
well, it's a journey.
Yeah, it is, and that kind of research is a journey. But I was just impressed with the humanity that you brought to Bob, and I came away from watching your film pretty well convinced that he's not making things up. Of course, the next question in your mind, which he obviously has faced and you even addressed, is like, oh, is he an unwilling participant in some kind of disinformation campaign? Because all these conspiracy theorists will say, oh, well, they tapped him out because he's well educated. We'll show him a bunch of crazy crap. He'll go talk about it and it will deflect from real development or something like that. But we have a research group and also people that email us that are high-level military folks, and they respect the work that they do and the people they work around, but almost all of them, to a person, will say, the government's not that organized. It's not that competent. The sophisticated psyop that all the conspiracy theorists think are happening, they can't pull them off.
With Bob Lazar, it's verifiably false, but we'd have to spend time. So, I could show you what I know. We go into that, but it's verifiably false. I will say, and Adam will be happy, the one connection between Bigfoot and Bob Lazar is that he was like the Yeti of ufology. Nobody could ever get him on camera. So that was kind of like the cool thing was, as a kid, that's how I got started in UFOs, is I heard him when I was 13 years old. And because I was kind of technical in my mind, it was the idea of the propulsion system he described. And it inversed my understanding of propulsion. Instead of like traditional reactionary propulsion, you push something out the back, you go forward. It was the idea of a gravity well, the idea of moving into time space. So that was just so cool. Didn't know if it was real or true, but it really interested me. And so I don't know, I think that that's important, that we can, if we're persistent over time, get people to come forward, even if it takes 30 years. I was really grateful that Bob allowed me into his life, because I said, give me your cell phone. I want to talk to everybody. Any box in your attic. I couldn't believe he said, okay.
Yeah, that is just amazing. It's amazing too sometimes, like what happens when you just ask. If you can get through to the guy, because not only do you score him, you scored Bigelow on Skinwalker. It's like Bigelow, he hardly ever does it. It's like he's in your thing and he was on 60 Minutes for 10 minutes, right? And then that's like...
Yeah. So George Knapp did that interview. Actually, George Knapp has a huge archive with Bigelow, but it was never allowed for release, but he allowed it in that film. And I was grateful, because it's important for people to hear him.
Yeah, it is really amazing.
We always say it's a journey. It's one thing that you brought up that's interesting, because what you're describing here and what Scott is describing as well for all of us, I think. We just started off wanting to do a podcast about interesting things, not necessarily just the paranormal, but interesting history, interesting personalities and people and events. And then you realize a few years later that you're somewhere else along this path that's much deeper and much more involved. And now you are speaking to a lot more people than you planned to.
But is that where you started, Jeremy, when you first heard Bob Lazar, or you started getting interested in UFOs? And how did that lead to wanting to be a filmmaker about these subjects?
Yeah, no, look, I never had aspirations to make films. I'm probably the least qualified person to make a film, but I'm persistent. And really, it took many years of getting to know Bob's friends and then talking with him. And I never pushed it on him. I just said, look, at some point, your story is going to be told by other people, and it's verifiably false what they're saying. We have to untangle that just a little bit. And I think eventually he realized, that was the case, that he would, at least put himself out there one last time and just tell it like it is. Putting stuff out, you have to bear the weight of public opinion. And I'm a very private person, actually. So it's like really uncomfortable for me. So I try to feed my mind like I feed my body. It's like I'm very intentional about what I put into my mind. And it was just so, the idea that I'd be somebody putting out stuff like this was not in my reality. But I think over time, as I said earlier, you realize that by doing that, you will learn so much more. More people will come forward to you. If your work is genuine and your intent is genuine, there's really no stopping you. So that's how I learned how to make movies, by making my first movies. Like I was always calling people, what's ISO? Well, I still don't understand it. So it's like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I would encourage people to not limit themselves, because everybody else will tell you what you can't do. And they're going to be way better at telling you what you can't do than you are at telling yourself what you can't do. So look, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I just do it because simply I learn more. And movies are really fun.
This is what Scott and I were marveling at. And we know you're so busy. That's why we were extra appreciative of you being able to come on, because you're like the one main focal point for public dissemination of the current disclosure happenings going on now. Did you ever see that yourself becoming fit for that role or heading that way when you start to make your documentaries and then you start to release clips? It's like, is it just because of the people in the know that start coming to you with information, allowing you to disseminate that? Or how does that path go? Because that also interests us. How do you get to where you are now in the media, being one of the main portals of information?
I've never worked for a government. Let's just put this all on the table. I've never worked for a government agency. No government agency is giving me footage. This whole experience that you're seeing is over 10 years of true gumshoe reporting, investigative reporting. Luckily, I've got George Knapp in my corner. He's been an incredible mentor, has allowed me to figure out ways and verify information. Like I couldn't have done these releases without him, because I get sent stuff every day, and to vet it and verify it, people think I just like get something and put it up on YouTube. It takes years. I am so confident with what I put out that I would put my life on it, that what I say is accurate. That's how confident I am. So over the years, and remember, there were specific things that I did that allowed people to come forward to me. So I held the secret of the Tic Tac UFO encounter until I broke it just prior to the New York Times article. Commander David Fravor and I were talking for years prior to that, and he didn't want the public attention, and I respected that. So people started to hear that if you really have sensitive information, the chain of command is broken. There's this guy, Jeremy, and he'll treat it well. He won't just like jump and try to put it out. He'll vet you, but he will be kind about it and he'll be clear about it, and that you can go to him. And so I kind of think that experience and then the next experience, they all led up to people feeling like, I'm not going to out them. I'm not going to put them in harm's way, because a lot of these people have risked a lot to get me this footage. The ways they did it, it was out of frustration. It's not the way that it should be. There should be a chain of command. I'll tell you, the Pentagon didn't even have a lot of the footage that I've released until I started doing this. Like they got it after. And that's a problem. That's a real problem, that the Senate Intelligence Committee would get this after a journalist did.
Yeah.
So that whole process is because there's a break in the link of the custody and chain of command and how people have been stigmatized with the UAP topic. Luckily, that is changing. And no, I never saw myself here, although I did decide this was the time to do this. I had this footage and have other footage for a long time. The thing is I need to feel confident with it. I need to have all my ducks in a row and then make sure that when I put something out that is absolutely accurate and it is impenetrable. And so people will be upset, like, well, why don't you just put everything out now? Well, I'm still vetting everything. Hold up. And people can't consume it that quickly. Did people really understand what a FLIR camera was for the first few years? The gimbal and go fast and Tic Tac videos were out? No, they didn't. It takes people time to understand the power and the gravity of what they're looking at. So I guess to summarize what we're talking about, this is a path that I chose. I chose to put this out. I chose every interview I did. I chose to do it. I couldn't keep up with it, so I tried to choose the right ones that would have the most bang for the buck, because I'm one person. I would never sleep if I did every interview. And I really hope it's contributed to the collective questions that people should be asking about these mysteries, including the UFO topic.
Do you worry now? Because I would, if I was in your position, because we do investigative stuff too, nowhere near on par with you, but like we're very careful about what we vet and who we talk to and how we treat our eyewitnesses and all that kind of stuff. Do you worry at this point, because you're so high profile, that there might be an effort to discredit you and that someone will send you something that after you've shared it, they themselves, whether they represent an individual or an organization, will later undermine that to make you look bad?
Yeah, it happens every week. Absolutely. It happens every week. Everybody wants me to trip. Everybody wants me to fall, slam on my face. Everybody wants that. Not only the government, but also just like Twitter, they would love that.
Yeah, so, especially Twitter.
Especially Twitter. Yeah. Apparently, I don't read it anymore, but yeah. So without this like cloak and dagger thing, see, one day maybe this can be told, but it's not like there's a shadowy individual who's leaking me a bunch of information. It's not like the government is passing me stuff, be like, good job, here's a paycheck. This is like built on a foundation of over a decade of trust and people I know. I'm very clear with each and every source, which there is just so many that like there's no way to pin it down. So in a way, it protects the way that I get information, and I am careful. I try to protect sources even if they don't try to protect themselves, which happens like all the time, right? But ultimately, of course, we know this from history. There are attempts within disinformation groups. So really, they're trying to control the narrative. So not only is it people that will give you false information to wrap that around on you later, and government's employed for sure, but additionally, there's people that will try to help you because they want to be able to control the narrative. It's really simple. Like we have historic record of this. This is not something I'm making up. This is something that's been done for a long time, even within the UFO community. Anytime you can control a popular issue as an information and intelligence agency, you've won. So you have to look at it that there's positive and negative attempts to control the narrative through people such as myself. If you're going on the news, like they'd love to control it. But really, I'm kind of impervious to it because I've kept my circles of trust really tight. And I have so many ways to verify stuff that are unknown to the majority of agencies that would want to control that narrative.
Well, let's talk about the latest, which I'm sure a lot of people are anxious to hear about. The latest clips that I've heard, the latest blips and news, certainly a lot of clips that pop up also on YouTube. There's a lot of information out there. And of course, a lot of listeners will tell us, it's like, hey, have you heard the latest? Like, yes, we've been getting people sending us these various clips. I think the latest trend now is that these are now verifiable by Navy personnel, submariners, electronics warfare officer on a battleship saw a Tic Tac, pretty much the same Tic Tac, fly through the air, go right into the water and become a USO, or it was always a USO. It's now being detected underneath the waves by submarine detection. So that's kind of the latest that we've heard. Is there anything else new?
UFOs have been documented to be under the water and moving at incredibly high speeds by our military for decades, like since we've had that kind of technology. I can't speak upon one individual source's description that I've never met or anything. I can talk about Commander Fravor, Commander Underwood, the people that I work with. Right. But you hear those stories, and that's really great. But what I'd like to just encapsulate for us, because there's a lot of misconception.
Sure.
And it's sad to me because man, I've like tried to task the, UFO Twitter and everybody to like get active and do stuff to help. So let me just encapsulate what I've tried to do over the last few months. Very slowly, I've been building the archive of visual data and information for the public about a unique series, one specific series of UFO events that have now been confirmed, separate from what you talked about, because that hasn't been. The stuff I put out has been. And so let's talk about that real quick. So I released a green video. They look like triangles, but they were actually from classified documents that I was exposed to, pyramidal in shape. Now, doesn't matter. They look like triangles, but that's the green video you saw. And it's from the USS Russell, 2019, July 15th. Then the next clip I released, I actually released 2 briefing slides that were contained within classified documents. However, they were inherently unclassified. That's what the U means in that. So I was very careful. I obtained those and I released those. And those show that green event and this other black and white event through a FLIR camera, thermal camera on another ship called the USS Omaha, they were part of the US government's UFO investigations. And then I'm like, bam, here's the video of that object in the FLIR, the black and white, where you see a spherical shaped UFO that goes, apparently looks like it goes into the water, and they search for it with a submarine. So I released all of that information. And then, by the way, that's when the UAPTF, the UAP task force, actually got some of that information. But they didn't have the complete stuff. They had the images, not the video. So it's kind of good I do this work, right? So then they didn't think so at first, and then they came around. So then I released something the world has never seen before, which is corroborative sensor data tied to FLIR visual data, which was the radar screen from inside the CIC, which is the Combat Information Center. It's a classified room, all this stuff, but I was legally able to do it because I obtained everything, and it was inherently unclassified because it was a navigation radar. But what I provided was corroborative visual and systems data evidence. And again, there's no example of this yet in history, and it's all coming out really quick. Right. And then icing on the cake, for me, it was the least visually stunning video, which is the inky black with the red lights. But I said, this is from the deck of the USS Omaha on July 15th, 2019, and it was shot by the same Viper, the Visual Intelligence Personnel Team. So interestingly enough, the Pentagon confirmed the green video, confirmed the slides, confirmed the black and white video, confirmed the radar video, and then they jammed me up on that last piece of footage. And if it's intentional, they're going to have a big problem, because I have 100 ways to make this absolutely clear that this is exactly as I said from the deck of the USS Omaha. And why is that important? It's just a black night sky, and they have a video camera, they're clicking on it and they're moving in. Okay, people miss the plot here. They should be fighting to ask the Pentagon spokeswoman who talks about UAPs if this is indeed from the USS Omaha, the same series of events. Instead, they're screaming and crying about how it's no better than any footage that was ever shown. Well, that's because you haven't done your job. You haven't pushed your government for answers. You're jumping on Twitter instead of jumping on emails. Yeah. That is the job of the American people if they want to know the truth. If they just want to scream and cry about it, good, I don't read Twitter anymore. So here's the deal, man. What I tried to do was paint a picture at this time where it is undeniable the United States government has to confirm this information so that people can get proactive in knowing that our government has more information and that we deserve to know the truth. But really, it's our right and it's our duty to find out. Just to encapsulate it, I want you to understand the gravity of why I'm spending sleepless nights doing tons of interviews is because I think this is really important. It sets a standard for our government responding to the American people.
It seems to me, in light of the somewhat anemic 9-page report that came out, which I know was only 120 days, you can't get a report together. It seems to me that you're a more valuable source of information at this point, and also applying more pressure to them to verify and come forward about what's happening versus that very short report that went to Congress. What do you think about that?
It takes all angles, right? You can't just expect a government agency or an intelligence agency to crack the books on all the secrets they have about UFOs. I mean, that report is anemic, as you said, but in some ways, it's a huge leap forward. And let me give you an example. it talks about, since 2004 to present day, military encounters. I think it talked about 144, where one was explained. Okay, great. So you have 143 unexplained, but like current, contemporary, modern day military study. Now, out of those, 80 of them had multiple sensor data on it. So multiple types of sensor data. So what that means is it's not like a glitch on the radar. They're actual physical objects. The others might be as well, but that's like confirmed. And then it says, I think 18 out of them, they demonstrated technical capabilities that are beyond next generation technology. So like what Commander Fravor saw, where he saw this wingless, rotorless, no control surfaces, the Tic Tac UFO come up and then instantly, bam, and it's 60 miles away at his cap point where he's supposed to go next. Like 18 of them showed characteristics that showed an advanced technology. So even though it was anemic in some ways, I thought they did such a great job of giving you these big statements that like, we don't know, like we need more investigation.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that they're more concerned that it's foreign technology as opposed to technology that's non-human?
Well, either would be foreign technology to us, right? But I will shoot you straight on this, which is nobody believes this is Russia or China. Nobody. I mean, everybody working on this, like from the inside, they know with certainty, there might be one or two that is like some sort of weird drone that was created. But like we're talking about the real cases, nobody believes that. They leave the door open because it gets funding. Like if you can identify an enemy, an adversarial nation, you'll get funding for a permanent UFO program, no problem. If you're like, we don't know who these are from, it's like, well, maybe it's not important then. So they were really smart by keeping that door open.
In one of your latest interviews, I saw, for certain, at least officials have come forward to you saying that we do have recovered technology, artifacts, physical things.
Full craft. And this is not just based on Lazar. This is a cumulative position that I'm taking with absolute certainty. And that's an interesting thing. When someone says absolute certainty, they've got good reason for saying that. And so from my position, I do not have the luxury of disbelief. We do have recovered technology that is from somewhere else. And not just military individuals, but also like titans of industry have been given access to some of these, I'll say, mechanics and materials. This is not something I'm saying. Look at what Senator Harry Reid talked about. He pointed the finger at Lockheed. That is correct information. Lockheed does have some of the technology. And then you think about Robert Bigelow. And Robert Bigelow had to retrofit his buildings for millions of dollars so they could hold classified materials. I don't know if he ever did, hold them at Bigelow Aerospace, but I'm saying there's a lot of indicators of people that you could go look at. So it's not just like the crazy guy with the beard, shorter than Adams, but still crazy guy with a beard. Take it for how you want. Imagine it like someone pointing a finger. Like, you can decide to look or not look, but I'd look at that. I'm beyond highly confident.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, that Nashville trip was the longest hotel stay I've had in a while. And boy, was I glad to get home to my purple mattress.
I know, man. Me too. I never really sleep great at hotels, and they do have those nice big down pillows. But honestly, down pillows make my head feel like it's being swallowed by a marshmallow. And I like my purple pillow so much more. So much better head and neck support.
I feel the same way. And whether it's at a hotel or some other vacation rental, a lot of times the mattress or pillows are a deal breaker because you wind up not sleeping as good as you do at home. The mattress is either worn out and kills your back, or it traps heat and you feel like you're burning up. Of course, our hotel had AC, but the temperatures in North Carolina and Tennessee this time of year are pretty brutal, and having a mattress that keeps you cool is a big deal. That's one of the main reasons I love the purple mattress. We've mentioned this before on the show, but they have what they call the grid, and its design absolutely keeps you cool because it lets air flow through.
Yeah, purple is not memory foam. It doesn't swallow you up like quicksand. It bounces back when you move around. It's cool. It's comfortable. It's the grid.
It's like floating on a cool supportive system that supports you no matter what position you're in. And for me personally, the purple mattress has almost completely eliminated lower back pain issues I used to have after a night on my old coil spring mattress.
Try your Purple mattress risk-free with free shipping and returns. And financing is available too.
Purple is comfort reinvented. Right now, you'll get 10% off any order of $200 or more. Go to purple.com/AL10 and use promo code AL10.
That's purple.com/AL10. Promo code AL10 for 10% off any order of $200 or more.
Purple.com/AL10. Promo code AL10. Terms apply. Hey man, I didn't get a chance to ask you, how was your flight home from Nashville?
Well, it was okay. It was just on a no-frills airline that didn't have in-flight entertainment or offered Wi-Fi, but at least it was a nonstop flight.
And you forgot to download a movie to your devices or bring a paperback book, didn't you?
Well, honestly, I thought I would be sleeping for most of the flight, but that wasn't the case. And I forgot the book I wanted to read was in the cloud, not on my device. However, remember last time when we were talking about carrying a secret weapon against boredom?
All right, that's right. You don't need the internet to play Best Fiends.
You got it, baby. It's free to download, so anyone can start playing it right away, even if you downloaded it right before boarding. But once you start, you're not going to want to stop.
Yeah, and you also don't need to put your device in airplane mode either, and you're kind of trapped there, so there's no reason not to play to your heart's content.
This is true. I mean, normally I'm trying to beat a few levels or complete task lists to win gold when I should be doing work for our show.
Yeah, that's not a secret.
But when you're on a flight, or maybe you're waiting for the kids to get done with an activity so you can pick them up, or even if you're already on your own computer, but you just need to look away at something else for a while to blow off steam or give your brain a break while still keeping it challenged, exercised, and active, Best Fiends is your best friend for a mini mind vacation you won't want to come back from.
Well, while we're waiting for stuff on our travels, I jumped up like 10 levels, and now I'm that much closer to winning the Baker Bob Special Fiend from the ice cream race.
Oh, bless your heart.
Wait, are you level shaming me?
Well, I would never dream of it, my good man. I'm just glad you're making progress and winning challenges, because it's about dang time. And that just goes to show you don't have to be a hardcore gamer to win in-game prizes and have a lot of fun while taking a break for a little while.
Exactly. Wait, what did you mumble?
Download the 5-star rated puzzle game Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play.
That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. All right, I'm going back to check the recording.
Hello, everyone. I'm Britt Gray, and this is Astonishing Legend. Now back to the show.
Did you ever ask Bob Lazar what he thought the limitations in terms of physics were based on the gravity propulsion system that he described? Because when you think about this, what's interesting to me about the way these craft appear to move was the whole idea of getting pulled forward, which is a basic lift principle. That's fluid dynamics. That's how an airplane wing works. When you're sailing, the wind's not pushing the sail, the low pressure on the front of it is pulling you forward. So it's like, I can actually grasp that as now we're trying to manipulate gravity. Here's another thing that was really interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of Terry Lovelace, but he's had a particularly well-detailed abduction experience. We had him on our show, did an interview with him. And one of the things that he talked about was how the craft at one point, it did that 90-degree rotation to approach them, which was exactly what it just keeps coming up about how the belly, Bob says the belly points towards the target.
At low speeds.
Yeah, and that's this whole thing that like you start, when you're doing all this, as long as we've been doing it and you've been doing it or whatever, you start to see these threads and all these people have never even heard each other's stories.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, okay, something is happening here. It also helps you determine which stories, if they're completely on their own, whereas when they have these common threads, you're more inclined to think, okay, this is part of the overall phenomena, whatever it is,
That's a really interesting, I'd never heard that metaphor about propulsion. I never thought about it where you have a sail.
Yes.
But I will argue that it's still reactionary propulsion, because even though it's pushing into the sail, that force, it's pushing back. And so that's why it's going forward. So
right.
we really have to look at what Bob said. It's completely opposite. He always said, like, imagine you put like a bowling ball on a mattress, push your fist down on the mattress, and the bowling ball falls towards it.
Right.
So it's a completely different type. That's what originally interested me in all of this. Bob will tell you he is making his best assessment of how the technology that he physically had hands on, like how it worked. he doesn't know for certain with this stuff. I mean, besides certain things, that it was element 115-ish, right?
Right.
So it's like, I really respect that about Bob. Like, if you believe his story or not, he doesn't care, and no longer do I care. But the idea that he knows what he's had his hands on, what he's worked on, he's certain on certain very specific things, and other things, he read it or heard it, and he doesn't know. But that propulsion aspect, and you originally started your question with like the limitations of it.
Yeah, is it interstellar? Is it going from point A to point B? Is it the wrinkle in time thing where you fold the paper and poke the hole through? Because I know with Fravor, like you said, it went, not only did it shoot 60 miles away, it was also the point where he was supposed to go to. So there's some sentient thing going on there. But in addition to that, what I'm trying to figure out is it coming literally from across the galaxy and it has to hit every point in between? Or is it blinking in and out of existence? And I wondered if Lazar had an opinion on that, I guess.
Such a deep question, because there's some real specifics here. But let's just start with this. Like Lazar said, I don't know. They said where the craft was from and all this stuff, but he goes, I don't know that. I read it and they said it. He goes, but looking at the craft, it was obvious that this craft could be interstellar. Like it could go in the low powered mode and just work off of the gravity based on Earth, where it's kind of like a ping pong ball floating on water, and it's like utilizing the gravitational field of the Earth to kind of hover. But in high power mode, when it flips on the belly, it points to 3 generators at one point. And he said there's no reason this craft couldn't be interstellar, because it does move you, in his understanding of it, through time-space almost instantaneously. But I say almost because there was actually a frequency to the gravity wave. This is very not known by anybody looking into this, but there was an actual frequency, a rhythm to it. So in essence, it's imperceivable to you if you were in it, I'm sure, but you are doing these jumps as you go. So it's not like one place there you are, the other place there you are, and you expand the piece of paper, like in that version you were talking about, or the rubber band.
Right.
There's these incremental leaps, but it's so tiny. It's not that you would truly experience that. So that's the way Bob understood the craft to work. But I will say this about the cap point with Commander Fravor. When people see these things move away, and optically it's like instantaneous, like a bullet out of a gun, and then all of a sudden, within 60 seconds, it's 60 miles away at the cap point. The argument that people will make is that, well, the radar itself was only picking it up and pinged it at that moment. It might have been there the whole time. Additionally, when he saw the Tic Tac moving over the object that was under the water, he said it looked like a ping pong ball in an empty cup of clear glass. It's going, no inertial effects. It's not exploding because of inertial effects. Now, everybody's like, wow, that's really cool. The materials must be really cool, and it doesn't explode, but people would become jelly inside. No, you're not understanding. If it's moving like that, it's a temporal gravitational distortion. It's the only way that everybody actually knows that they're gravity-based engines. Anybody that I've ever talked with that has worked in these exploitation programs, they know they're gravity-based. So what you're seeing, though, is not necessarily what's happening.
Right.
Because it could be a temporal distortion, and you're looking at it, and for them, they might just be chilling, moving slow.
Yeah.
Right.
That's such a common description with people seeing UFOs, is that falling leaf pattern. You hear that a lot, where it's just slowly coming back and forth. It's kind of hypnotic. People viewing it have described a hypnotic feeling of just this thing kind of lulling. And then you think, but that's how we think. We think of gravity. It's like, well, I'd be seasick inside. It's like their perspective would be vastly different, of course.
Whatever their version of 1G is constant for them as passengers in the craft.
Okay, I'll ask this question, which has been on my mind since the beginning, because I've been tracking how people react to what Jeremy has been putting out there. And for all of us, like Scott and Adam, when we say stuff, we know what the kind of reaction we get, which is not always positive. And as I say to our audience and to Scott all the time, it's like I've learned probably more about human behavior, sociology, psychology, and just how people tick than I have the paranormal. Judging by how people react to this, well, that's what's important, because we don't live in a vacuum. It affects all of us, and how we react to it is as much an important part of this as the phenomenon itself. So Jeremy, like, what's one of the biggest criticisms that you get from things that you're talking about, because we see this, and it's funny, like when you first brought it up, people, armchair experts are getting on Reddit and they're saying like, well, maybe these pilots didn't know what they were looking at because, they certainly don't get any training in electronic warfare analysis and operating their equipment. And then you have optical, electrical engineers chiming in on your behalf saying like, no, I work for a company that makes this stuff, someplace like Raytheon. And I supporting what you're saying. So what's one of the biggest few criticisms that you get? And what would be your counter to that to set the record straight?
It's usually about my beard or something. Obviously, Adam's got it down.
Yeah.
Like an actual criticism. I mean, usually people are just like, you're a liar, you're, this, you're that. It's usually not like an actual criticism. It's just anger, dissatisfaction.
Right.
Why are you holding videos? Why are you releasing crap videos? I mean, it's just like people are just like, they're not happy. I don't think they have love in their life. I mean, I don't know.
Yes, I would agree with all of that, because that's what, it falls in line with a lot of what we get, where they may have some technical things, but you're arguing about the unknown. It's like nobody has the right answer yet. Some do, but we don't know them, and they're not coming forward quite yet. But when people do complain, you do sense that this stuff upsets people. It rocks your belief system. You're going to have to change everything. One piece of technology, as Bob Lazar was saying, it's like this changes the world with energy, economics, everything.
Yeah, and it's much easier for people to, instead of look into something and try to conceive of it from a data-rich perspective, where you've really looked through the information and you've asked intelligent questions and you're starting to build your knowledge base of whether you agree with this or not agree with it, or you think it's solid evidence or not. It's much easier to be like, you idiot. So I think it's laziness, but that's okay. I am impervious to evil. It's something that I've learned a long time ago. I just it doesn't affect me in the way that I think they're intending to affect me. At some point, it's just too much in my head. I just will see too many negative things. People doxed me and my phone number and my wife's phone number. It was horrible. So you have to learn how to shield yourself from the criticisms that are not helpful and don't help you learn more, and then take the criticisms in that help you be a better presenter, investigator, or human being. It's a hard thing to do. But the main thing is there's no stranger that has walked a mile in my shoes. I mean, that's the saying. So their value and opinion of me, it means a lot less than my wife's, my family's, or my dog's. My dog is very important.
Yes.
Riley his opinion matters every day. Right? I don't know exactly what the question is. I mean, we can go over a specific thing that people want to know the answer to that maybe I haven't thoroughly explained, but usually the criticisms are just irrelevant, completely and utterly irrelevant. Water off a duck's back.
I could see with Bob too, whenever you were talking to him, especially after you got done with the film and you're coming back on YouTube and asking him to look at the Fravor footage and that stuff, you can see the engineer scientist in him, how he's gatekeeping because of all the things that have kicked back on him that he said. So he's and so it affects his the way he speaks.
I asked him about that. He's like, how could I think it's in my movie when we're building the fireworks, maybe he goes, he's like, how can it not affect you? He's like, of course it's affected the way every single word I say has been dissected to a place of utter nonsense. He's like, there's an anger there over 30 years. Now, I haven't experienced 30 years of it, but I'm doing something smart, which is completely tuning out the things that don't matter. I'm doing my best to do that, because you can't alter your behavior based upon the expectations of others. You're not being true to yourself with that. Now, you can better yourself. I believe that. But if you stop from doing something that you think is important, you're going to hate yourself for that.
I couldn't agree more, by the way. Before because we want to talk about this path where you and Adam have crossed, because this is a very interesting story. But just before we get to that, I did want to ask you about one scene in the film with Lazar, which is the one that preceded the FBI raid, where you had said that they referenced a conversation that you guys had out in the woods. You even made a point of leaving this footage where you said, we're going to take the phones and go put them over here. How far away were the phones? How do you think they gathered that conversation? How do you think they bugged that conversation?
This has been a subject of just utter frustration for years, for me and Bob and some of the people I consulted with, who do reconnaissance for federal agencies. And it turns out it's not that hard to do that. So just to be very clear, in case your audience doesn't know, this is the one time where I felt my privacy was impeded upon, and then that there was a very intentional campaign to try to muddy the waters. And that was new to me. I had never, you hear about it, but like you never really believe it until it happens to you. And then you're like, wow, people do care. So to clarify for everybody, I'm filming with Bob for years, and we wanted to have a private conversation, but we wanted it documented. I wanted the whole thing documented, and I wanted to have it so that no matter what, one day that's coming out. And it was a really trusting situation from Bob, but we had known each other for years now. So we go to this forest area right on his property, though, at the time when he was living in Michigan. And we start talking, and it's like, I got the camera that it's recording directly there. And I go, it was kind of like a joke. I was like, whoa, hey, Bob, I'm not paranoid, but just in case, let's like move the phones, right? And Bob, I think I put it in the movie. You could see his reaction. It was kind of like, okay, we didn't really believe this was an issue. Bob even said something funny. He was like, Jeremy, it's been like, at the time, maybe 20.
Oh, yeah. I think he said 30 years or something. Yeah. They don't care about me anymore. Yeah.
Well, little did we know, we found out later, I'm jumping ahead a little, but they were surveilling his property where we were and his place of business on that day. Federal agencies, that we have documents that show this. Now they're saying it was for another reason, but the fact remains that they had a warrant for both his house and his property, and there were agents in the town, and they were deciding which one to raid. So even though it was like the old saying, even if you're paranoid, doesn't mean they're not after you.
Yeah.
Like it's so funny. So I took the phones and I put them at a very reasonable distance of, 200, 300 meters. I mean, it was far away. And I think I shut them off too. And then, come back and we do the filming. And so in my movie, I was never intending, that's like a tease to put that in the movie, but it was my only weapon or defense against the fact I wanted people to know that the raid was real.
Right.
Because what happened was, after I mentioned it, everybody said I paid actors. He was never raided. I paid actors. It was all BS. I mean, gosh, I wish I was that creative, I was back home and I went to go visit my mom, and I saw the text come in, and I had just been waking up. And I was like, oh my gosh, Bob was raided. And she takes this moment. She's like, that's really good for your movie. And I'm like, oh, what are you thinking? I was like, my mom is such a gangster. I was so worried.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
So what happens is, look, there's a federal agency. They came in and they raided Bob's place. They gridded out. There were like 27 plus agents. He took some sly photos. But how we know that conversation was documented, and there were other employees, by the way, who were there. So this is not like one man's word.
Right.
They recorded that conversation, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
They had complete documentation of that conversation, but they wouldn't have to have raided him if they had heard the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
So what was interesting was that their knowledge base went right up to the point where I moved the phone. So I figured it was from the phones, but the only people that deal with the phones is the NSA, and you have to have a FISA warrant. And if you've ever asked the NSA for a FISA warrant, who would ever do that? But if you did, they would say, can't confirm nor deny. They never admit it. So there's no way we're ever going to find out how that happened, if it was a legal process or not. But he was raided. They said it was for a material, that was used in a murder for like a case. Now remember, Bob Lazar has been raided multiple times. The whole point is this: if Bob Lazar is telling you the truth, then you can see what happened through a lens or a prism that makes more sense. If he's not telling you the truth, this stuff is weird. Why is it happening to Bob?
Your two latest documentaries that I believe are out, Hunt for the Skinwalker is on Tubi. That's where I saw it. And
it's on. Oh, really? It is.
Yeah,
I know it's on Hulu too. Yeah.
Right. And then the Bob Lazar documentary, I bought it on Amazon, and it's great to own it.
Okay.
Check them out there, folks. But in the connection between the two films, that was one question I had while watching both and while making notes of questions to ask you. What is the connection to the high strangeness, the overall phenomenon? What is, we are always tinkering with the idea of the connection point, the universal theory between the paranormal and all of its various forms. And that's one question you asked at the end, towards the end of Hunt for the Skinwalker, and you asked it to George Knapp, is what is the connection between the Skinwalker Ranch and UFOs and cattle mutilations and all of this weird stuff that's going on that seems so disparate, but there is a through line?
Skinwalker seems to tie so many things together. It was a mind-blowing thing for us when we covered it. For me especially, I was like,
right.
Talk about the kitchen sink. I mean, it's just like everything.
If I remember correctly, and I made a note of what George said at the end, and he was a little coy about it, saying that Bass was really, that's the bigger project, where that's a public study. And again, I think the acronym stands for, is it Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies? By now, we know NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, also funded by Bigelow, but also not many people don't think, I guess they're not thinking about the Bass project. And George Knapp hinted at that being a bigger, wider reaching and more secretive, because, I just thought about this. Now that UFOs are coming into the mainstream and people are saying, well, I guess there's something out there that our own government is saying. When I think about it, cattle mutilations and the high strangeness is even higher secret. It's even higher, bigger, darker, blacker secret than now these Tic Tacs are. So what do you think is going on here? What's the connection?
Yeah, let me break it down to you. And all roads lead to a mutilated animal's rectum with mine and Adam's head in it. So everybody, don't worry, we're going to get there. But let me break this down for you really simply. First of all, that movie, Hunt for the Skinwalker, remember, I made that right before the announcement by the New York Times, before this explosion of information where everybody knew about AATIP and AATIP. George and I knew, we had to be careful of saying it. So the first scene in the movie, George is saying something's about to happen. And I put the dates in there. And sure enough, it did. That's what changed the world about all of this. And AATIP and AATIP were eventually identified. So here's the breakdown to get people up to date so they understand what the significance of Skinwalker Ranch is. Because for me, it was a challenge to really understand it. And I still struggle with it because it does include so many different types of phenomena. And I was just interested in the UFO phenomena, but I couldn't any longer dismiss these connections. And it remains uncomfortable for me. But here's what happened. Robert Bigelow bought a ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. He started something called NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Science. And it was to study UFOs, because that's what was seen at the ranch. And so what a great living laboratory. It's not like the boundaries of the ranch have anything to do with it. It's the whole Uinta Basin, but he's got a living laboratory. Great. So he does that for a long time, almost a decade. And then all of a sudden, some people at the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, read George Knapp's book. And they had already had, numerous things going on with the unknown, let's say. So then they ask, because of George's book, to go to the ranch. They ask Bigelow. Bigelow gives one of those agents access to the ranch. And within minutes, the guy has an experience. So they initiate a contract under what's called AATIP. So they talk with Harry Reid, and they do this black budget study that's focused on UFOs, but associated phenomena. And that was called AATIP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program. So that UFO program, the mother program. Now, what happens from there is they create a contract for who is going to study this. And not only was Bigelow the most qualified, he wasn't the only bidder, I don't think, but he was the most qualified, but he was willing to throw his own money into it as well to retrofit his buildings, like I said before, to house certain materials. So then you've got the creation of BASS, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies. And that was what was beholden to the American government's contract of AATIP, which was the DIA contract. So that's a study that then went on for numerous years. We then hear about AATIP, and AATIP was a loosely knit group of people that learned from AATIP and kind of coexisted at one time, but they were focused on military encounters. It was not well funded, but that's where Lou Elizondo comes in. And that's the work that he was doing, that his own boss didn't even know he was doing, but now it's verified. Everybody said, oh, Lou's lying, until George Knapp released the documents and Harry Reid writes a letter. Right. Then all of a sudden everybody understands Lou's telling the truth. So the whole point of this, your government was studying UFOs in its infinite wisdom. It was studying the true path, which is it leads you to other phenomena. They express themselves at Skinwalker Ranch, but also throughout history. So the cattle mutilation mystery, which leads us to me and Adam, right? The cattle mutilation mystery, it was really something that, look, no one has ever been caught. These are surgically tooled cuts. The blood is drained, the cheeks are cut out. Whatever the details are that happens with some of them, this is not natural. No one has ever been caught. No suspect has ever been brought to justice or even identified as a suspect. And it's been happening for decades, if not centuries. Now, why is this related to UFOs? I don't know for sure that it is, other than hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of witnesses saying when these mutilations occur, there's often UFOs in the vicinity. So you have to at least see a correlation that needs to be looked at. Now, that's not what Adam and I were doing. We were just looking at the carcass itself, but it's like, that's the association. So it leads you to all of these uncomfortable questions, which is that, is the universe a bigger place than we recognize? And not just like outward expanding. I mean, is there a fabric of reality that we believe to be real, but is only a boundary or a barrier to a deeper reality? And sometimes does it get like perforated and you can get a glimpse through? Is it artificial in its intelligence? Or is it something more akin to spirituality? Or are these just, aliens from other planets, making you see what you want to see? I don't know. But these are interesting questions that we got to ask unless we want to put our heads in the sand and deny reality. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's the breakdown of Skinwalker Ranch, what it's about, how the studies came about. And it all leads to making a movie, and then, which was ahead of its time because we couldn't even say the names of the programs. And then Adam, recognizing that there are similarities with the shocking thing that he and his son stumbled upon, and then our developed friendship where we ended up feeling comfortable enough to go inside a cow together.
Well, that's the mark of a true friendship, when you feel that comfortable with each other. It's pretty cramped. But Adam, what did you first think? There's one scene it's pretty graphic in the film, but you need to see it in Hunt for the Skinwalker. And people that care about animals as well as all of us do here, it was kind of heartbreaking because it's a young calf, a new calf that hadn't been tagged yet, and the mother seemed to be injured, and she was limping around wailing for her baby. And this thing is basically just taken apart and splayed on the ground in an unnatural, all spread eagle, if you will, fashion on the ground. And when you look at it, it's immediate that this is not just a natural death. So Adam, when you came upon that carcass, like, what were your first thoughts? Was it just like, oh, here's a dead cow? Or was it immediately, something's wrong about this?
So when I first came up on it, I saw it from a long way away, and every time I see a cow skull that has horns, I just grab it, and we kind of have a place where we let them bleach out or whatever, and then we don't ever really do anything with them, but they're fun to have. I saw this thing out there, and I saw a horn sticking up, and so I knew that it had horns still on it, and it looked like it still had the cap, the keratin or whatever it is, that the bones underneath that, but whatever. Right. Okay, so it still had those, and usually predators or coyotes will chew those up really quickly. Ended up still having both of them, so I was like, oh, cool, I'll go over there and rip the head off this thing and put it on the little pedestal that we have. So I'm over there, and I'm like, the light's pretty good for photography right now. I'm just going to pull out my phone and take some pictures of it, and you can kind of see the smelter in the background. The smelter's actually got some pretty fun stories behind it too, if we have time to get into it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It seems haunted in itself, or just one of those weird industrial places that's a little spooky.
Really, when I found the cow, it brought about this feeling that like the smelter was kind of like Skinwalker light, because, normally, what we found out there it's just been kind of more of like the ghostly haunting type of stuff. But now there's this, and it's like, and then I actually, coming on the heels of finding this thing, I've actually seen some very weird things in the sky.
This is in the Texas Panhandle region?
Yeah, Texas Panhandle. I mean, if you go straight west, it's probably 50 minutes to New Mexico, I guess.
Okay.
So, no, but I was just taking pictures of the cows, so I could, there's like 3 big smokestacks out there, And, you know, I like to take pictures out at the shop. A lot of people do, actually. That's where old, abandoned, you know, it was abandoned in the 70s and everything's kind of falling apart. And it just looks like, you know, something out of a zombie movie or something like that. And so taking pictures, and I'm looking at the pictures, and the head is sort of coming, you know, at me, and, you know, it's laying on its left side, kind of pointing out to the east or whatever. So it's looking into the setting sun. Or I'm sorry, it's looking out to the west, my bad. And I'm noticing in the picture, not actually looking at the cow, but in the picture, that there's just this perfect line from like where the ear would be all the way down, you know, the long face of the cow, all the way to the corner of the mouth. And it's just a perfectly smooth cut. And there's nothing below that except for the jawbone. And so I'm like, what? Okay, it's very obvious, you know, but I didn't notice it right at first. You know, it took looking at that picture for a second to really notice it. I look down at the cow. Sure enough, it's you know, for sure cut with a very sharp blade in one motion. You know, the line is slightly curved, but it's one cut, and it's like all the hairs. So it's like, you know, if this is the plane, the hairs come down to right there, you know, all along it. And, you know, there's no hair like sticking down past it. You know you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Almost like it was done with a lightsaber or something like that, you know. And I get to looking at the rest of the body, and the hide from the bottom of the jaw has been pulled back all the way down the neck, and it's just kind of in this sock. It's sort of just laying like that. And then down below that, there's a cut that goes from sort of the, you know, the chest area all the way down to, you know, like where the privates would be, I guess. And this thing's just, the whole bottom of it has just been opened up with, it looks like whatever did it made the edge of the cut skin look like a saw blade.
Yeah. It's serrated looking for people
it's
like trying to visualize.
Serrated.
It's like a saw, like a saw
and
blade.
Even having been there for what I found out was almost a year before I found it. You know, I found out it was just a dried husk of hide around a skeleton. You know, there was no tissue left at all.
The Great Courses Plus has been with us almost from the beginning as sponsors, and I'm grateful because along the way, we've learned a lot of fascinating stuff from them that I don't think we would have had a chance to if they hadn't been there.
Yeah, and according to so many of you who've signed up, it's been great for you too. Well, now, the Great Courses Plus is Wondrium. That's WONDRIUM. It's everything we've always loved about their streaming service, plus a whole lot more. They have thousands of audio and video learning experiences to feed your curiosity, and the content is fun and exciting, and it gives us access to a world of knowledge from top experts and storytellers.
I was browsing it the other day, and this one set of episodes titled Monsters Within caught my eye. This series has 3 episodes, and I've watched the first one called Psychological Horror Films with Professor Eric R. Williams from the School of Media Arts and Studies at Ohio University. All things strangely back to Ohio. Well, Professor Williams teaches courses on screenwriting, films, and virtual reality production, and he has an MFA in film from Columbia University, so this man's got the chops.
Nice choice of words there.
This episode actually does start out with Hitchcock and Psycho. Did you know Psycho was inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who also inspired the Buffalo Bill character for Silence of the Lambs?
I knew that about Buffalo Bill, but I couldn't remember that about Psycho.
Yeah, well, Psycho was one of the first psychological thrillers, and even though it only had 3 minutes of violence in it, Hitchcock couldn't get the studios on board, so he paid the $1 million to make it out of his own pocket. He didn't show blood and guts, as Professor Williams says. He left that out. The terror was in your mind, which in a lot of ways is what I love about Mark Pellington's direction and Rich Haddam's script for the Mothman prophecies. It's not about seeing the Mothman all the freaking time. It's about knowing he's there and never seeing him clearly.
Well, we know you're going to love Wondrium as much as we do. Remember, when you go to sign up, use our special URL so that they know we sent you. That URL is wondrium.com/legends.
And for a limited time, once you do sign up, you'll get a free month trial of unlimited access.
That's wondrium.com/legends. Again, wondrium.com/legends.
When my wife and I first moved to Los Angeles many years ago, we were pretty much a couple of dumb kids, you know? We lived in this crappy little apartment by LAX with black mold and jets flying over constantly. But you know what we did have?
Bed bugs?
No, come on, man. It wasn't that bad. But also, we didn't know about the mold till we moved out. I digress. We had credit cards. And you know what I wanted?
I don't know. I give up.
A big screen TV. And I mean, you know, back then it was basically this rear projection contraption the size of a puppet show theater. And they were like $2,000. But we had that credit card. So I bought us one. And a nice bedroom suite. And we like to eat out a lot. Oh, and there was a giant map of the world I had professionally dry mounted to hang behind our couch.
Whoops.
Yeah, we spent thousands. And here's the thing about foam core. It warps like crazy. So that map curled up anyway. Stupid. But stupider than that was the tens of thousands of dollars in debt we racked up. I felt like I'd been hit by a train when I realized that.
Oh, yeah, man, that is rough. And it can take forever to pay off. I mean, if you're just making the minimum payments, you're just paying the interest. And every month it pops right back on there.
Well, back when we got in over our heads, we'd had to call a loan shark to get out of trouble. We wound up paying it off, but it took a long time. And we had to forego a lot of necessities to get there. We didn't have any other options. But today there's Upstart. Upstart is the fast and easy way to pay off your debt with a personal loan all online.
You're more than just your credit score. And Upstart knows that. Unlike other lenders, Upstart considers your income and current employment to find you a smarter rate for your loan.
Yeah, whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get one fixed monthly payment.
And with a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate up front for loans between $1,000 to $50,000.
You can receive funds as fast as one business day after accepting your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/legends.
That's upstart.com/legends. And don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you.
Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application.
Go to upstart.com/legends.
Hi, this is Patty. You may know me from the Patterson-Gimlin film. When I'm not avoiding the paparazzi, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends.
Animals that are cut up and found this way aren't afterwards cleaned up by predators and scavengers. They leave them alone. And what they've noticed before is that animals that are struck by lightning and died in an unnatural, I mean, it's a natural fashion, but highly rare, that they leave them alone. That there's something that other animals can sense. And like, as you come across it, this thing's been sitting here a year. There's no scavengers, no birds, nothing's really touched it, and no blood around it.
To the extent where the stomach, the contents of the stomach, we're still in the shape of a stomach. Inside the rib cage. So you've got this rib cage and you can look inside it and you just see this thing that looks like a cow stomach, but it's just a big lump of grass that was just completely undigested. So that stomach rotted away around it without ever having been pulled out. And I see coyotes out there all the time. We've got bobcats out there. There's coyotes. There's stray dogs. You know, there's raccoons. There's all kinds of wildlife out there. And it's like I said, even the caps on the horns were still there after that time. And everything loves to eat those. You know, it's like, oh, there's a nice little picture right there. So right here, you see how all the hairs, I'm sorry, everything's backwards.
It's okay.
All the hairs, oh my gosh, are coming this way.
Yes.
So even after that much time, you can still sort of see that the hairs have been laid over this way as whatever it was sort of cutting it. You know, it was almost like scissors were going through and pushing that back. Like maybe I picture, you know, my dad was the one that sort of came up with this idea, but he's like, I feel like it could have been like something akin to a tin, like a mechanical tin snip.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, it's scissors, but they're just like, brrr, you know, and that would absolutely kind of do that, you know, with if everything was still wet and pliable and fresh, you know, like I should have cut some off right then and preserved it. But by the time I made it back out, you know, it was degraded a lot more. The hair was almost all worn off just by weather and stuff. And you couldn't see that directionality in the direction that the cut was going. But I did go out and measure it, and the distance between serrations were exactly the same as the picture that was featured in the film Hunt for the Skinwalker. Now, do y'all have that picture still, or it was just a picture of my TV with it paused on that?
Oh, right. I remember that.
I've got it here.
Yeah, that was one of the last ones.
Yeah,
you
I've got it
texted
here.
us.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
I do.
But for people listening, to describe it, yeah, that's one thing I noticed is that if it were a predator chewing a line, you could say into the hide, that hair would not be, you wouldn't think it would be pushed back like that. Like it seems it's very deliberate in the way that the hair, like you said, and the hair leading right up to it is also cut, not like it's chewed. So something sliced through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I want to say, I don't know if it was Eric Davis, the physicist that was on the team for NIDS in the interview, or if it was Colin Kelleher. The one thing that's physically does not make sense is that there's no blood around there. So if it was done on the ground, obviously there'd be blood, or there's something sucking the blood out as it's doing it. But the more logical possibility is that this thing was taken up or into a machine of some kind or a craft.
Right.
A machine was applied to make these cuts and excisements or incisions and remove the things. And then this thing was dropped, because that's the other thing that was odd about Skinwalker Ranch was that they were saying some of the cattle looked like it had been dropped from a great height.
Yeah, from a great height, right.
Just to make it really clear to your audience, to talk about what Adam's describing, he's saying that with predators, you have certain signatures on the animal where a predator will have ripped out the flesh, even the hairs, they get caught in the mouth and they tear, right?
Right.
Adam's point here, I believe, which is accurate because I ended up taking the samples to a laboratory, an accredited laboratory in Los Angeles, to look at it through scanning electron microscopy, which is just a really intense microscope. And I have photos and we'll send them to you so you can include them in here. But you can see this was done by tools, that this was unnatural. These were not tears by predators by any means. And not only that, but they were surgical grade tools. You can see under the scanning electron microscope the absolute precision with which the angle of the hairs were cut. It is so precise, you can't do the same thing with scissors. So that's what's so interesting, is that this was a specialized, by the way, which is indicative of a true cattle mutilation. This is the signatures are two separate cutting tools, part of the cheek removed. Now, we don't know about the tongue or the eye or the genitals, but also the body not being disturbed. And as Adam's describing, the stomach contents being in the shape of a stomach, nothing's tearing out the stomach. That's like the yummiest part. So, and the rear, I'll say, was perfectly surgically cored out. And you can see the flesh and how it's done.
Yeah, we found the same serration marks on the around the anus. Remember that?
Yeah, that's where we went in.
I didn't even notice that. I just kind of looked, and there's just a hole about that big where there should be a hole about that big.
Yeah.
And you got to looking at it, and you said, "Adam, look at this. I think that is actually serrated too." And we got down, and it was.
Yeah, that's the joke where we both went in, but we had to look. It was cored out. It was cut out. And all of this is kind of filmed and documented. And I haven't even showed Adam yet because I want to watch it with him. But it's like it's a piece that I haven't put out because it was for something else. But I think Adam and I will hold a viewing party at some point, and we'll watch it together for the first time. But it's a 45-minute, really cool piece. Anyway, it's a mystery. Look, I took it to a laboratory. Adam was very precise with how he looked at it. He's not, Adam's not an overstated guy. Seeing it myself, I was like, wow, this, for the first time in my life, I'm seeing something I really can't explain. This is the core idea of what a cattle mutilation is. And there were some roadblocks I think are interesting. And Adam, you might want to talk about that. But you do live in a place where there's a lot of religious belief, and you were up against this idea. You work at your church. You were up against this idea of, okay, this is weird. We don't explain. How do I dance around this? How do I talk about it? I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm actually the worship director at my church. We're a non-denominational church in the Bible Belt. So, it's kind of one of those communities where everybody, or, most people go somewhere. So when I found it, I came into church the next day, and I was telling everybody about it. Because I'm like, I thought this was just on, History Channel or whatever. And no, one of the elders up here actually I told him about it, and he goes, yeah, back when he was younger, back in the 70s, you know, he was working out by Clayton, New Mexico, which is only an hour and a half from here. And the ranch next to the one he was working on had 2 bulls turn up overnight, mutilated with various soft tissues and reproductive organs and tongues and eyes and ears missing. And then he goes on to tell me about the time that he saw a UFO, you know, and so what do you think about that? You're an elder, you know, I'm just the music director. And he was just like, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of questions that I have for God when I get to heaven, and that's just one of them. And that's kind of the way I look at it. And this has actually yet to happen. Nobody's. I get the, you know, the cheeky comment every now and then, but people know that I'm like, I think my pastor's wife got me a pair of socks with Bigfoot on them, you know, just recently, and stuff. And they know that I'm into that. And, you know, it's fun for me, you know, whatever. I grew up on that stuff. So I don't discount anything just out of hand just because it's not overtly stated in the Bible, right? There are a lot of things that aren't explained in the Bible. And, you know, you can talk to any pastor or whatever, and you talk to him long enough and ask them enough questions, at some point they're going to come to a point where they're like, we just really don't know about that. And that's something that I'm going to ask God about when I get to heaven. You know, if anybody ever really comes down on me about it, that's how I'm going to kind of explain this. I'm like, look, there's evidence of some weird things out there, you know, especially, you know, thanks to Jeremy, there's a lot more evidence than there used to be. But I'm not willing to dismiss it out of hand just because it goes against my belief. Maybe it doesn't go against my belief. Maybe that's just a question that I have for God. Hey, how come you didn't tell us about the UFOs? How come you didn't tell us about Bigfoot? Why isn't that in the Bible? Well, that's a question that I have for God. And I don't really feel like I need to reconcile that with my faith. I mean, I have my faith and I'm perfectly sound in that and everything else, but there's more out there, and it intrigues me, and I don't feel ashamed of that at all. Everybody's been supportive, and you know, I was making jokes earlier about I hope nobody comes into the office, because that's where I'm at. I'm at my office right now, and you know, I hope nobody barges in, because you know, it'd be worse than them telling them I was doing something else in here. But no, the fact is, everybody knows that I'm coming on this program because I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to meet you guys, and no, I go to a pretty cool church actually, so I'm blessed for that.
I've learned a lot from Adam. I just want to say real quick, I really have learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned, besides he's got a great beer, he's got great barbecue out there, and he's got a great sense of humor, is that the acceptance with which Adam puts on, hey, I found evidence. I found something. I don't know what it is. I mean, he called me about it, and it was like very straightforward. And so the way he handled it was just from a place of curiosity. It's really hard for people to mock that or to put, you know, problems on that when Adam himself is just so genuinely curious and straightforward about it. So that's kind of a testament to who Adam is, but also it shows you that how open people are, you know, despite things that you might think would be a problem for them in reconciling these mysteries, they're not really there. And it's because of the way you approach it. That does say something about Adam, but it also says something about human beings. You know, we're very adaptable and curious.
You were talking about Adam about in the hunt, which I thought was, I wish that I could have shared them. Of course, now you're seeing my text come in, but the NIDS picture, the freeze frame here, and the measurements on the serration, right, which is similar to the piece that you found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about 2 serrations per centimeter.
And so that seems to be consistent. Was that consistent on all, I can't remember, at Skinwalker? Was that always there?
Actually, across the globe, there are typically 2 types of cuts on cattle mutilations. One is a serrated cut, and then the other is a very, very sharp singular toothed instrument.
Right. Okay.
And they know they're made of metal because they can show with mass spectrometry, they can show that there was a metallic tool.
Right. Right.
The serrated cuts, though, do they look like that?
Yeah, exactly like that.
Really?
Adam, you were right in looking and comparing. Now, obviously, sun weathering and whatnot will start to deplete each serration, but you can tell the space between. That is an absolute, see that clean cut along the jaw there? That is an absolute classic case of cattle mutilation right there. It was astounding. I've never seen one in person.
It's just unbelievable. You know, I think I mentioned to you guys in our text chain that my dad lives in Denver, and some very close friends of his have a 100-acre ranch west of Trinidad. And it's like a ground zero for Colorado there. And I guess the sheriff in Trinidad had or the former sheriff has files and files and files on the mutilations in the area. And they see UFOs, these folks that live out on this ranch, all the time. All the time. And being the 100-acre ranch, they're the small one. It's like the one next door is the guy who invented burn beds for hospitals. It's like 200,000 acres or something. And so it's just beautiful, pristine land. And the night sky is actually the UFO observation tower is about an hour from them, from where these guys are at.
Oh, yeah. I heard about that one.
Yeah. It's like just a metal thing. And they're just, you go out there and stand up there one night, you'll see something. You know, like, so it's just.
Your dad and his friends had seen a mutilated carcass.
The people at the ranch have. Yeah, my dad hasn't. And the ranch hands, because they're the year-rounders down there. The other folks that own these other ranches, you know, they just come on little vacations.
Yeah.
So they know all the guys who run the ranches, and they're the ones that have the stories. The people that are working the ranch or trying to keep it open.
It's undeniable. Right. Look, when you're a rancher, Adam can talk more about this than I can, but it's like it's not a small deal, especially depending on what types of animals you're raising. Like, animals will die. But when you see one of your animals that was obviously tortured, I mean, I don't know if it was anesthetized, but it was, killed by somebody. This is something that, you can start freaking out about. I mean, somebody's come onto your property, and as Adam said to me, everybody on these ranches, they got guns, man. You got to risk a lot to come in there and just have some fascination with mutilating cows. You might just get a bullet shotgun to the chest. So it's not like something that is low risk, but it's something that no one's ever been caught for. No suspect ever. And why these same things? I don't have answers for any of this, but got questions.
There's a highway that runs right by it. You can see the place. People break in all the time. They tear stuff up. They steal stuff. They've always been doing that. So, like, the sheriffs, they keep an extra close eye on it, because right now there's nothing going on out there. It's pretty much just storage and, the occasional rabbit hunt. But even back when my dad was working out there, people would break in, and it's a really cool place. People like to go out there and get scared, and there's one building with a big huge basement and stuff. But the thing is, you can't see that cow from the highway, so like there's no like hoax factor going on. I mean, it wasn't like right out there for everybody to see. I mean, I was walking around up in the plant for 4 or 5 hours before I even saw this thing. I mean, it's at the very back of the property. It's on about a half section of land. And, so it's practically half a mile off of the highway, and there's enough topography that you just can't see it from the road. And so, I mean, if somebody was going to do this thing, if a person was going to do it to try to make some sort of fuss, around town or whatever, they picked a really bad spot to do it in, I guess. Jeremy can tell you about how easy it is to walk up on one of these things. The film crew was like, hey, we got cows, shoot the cows. And Jeremy is like, I'm going to try to walk up to one and see what happens. And then, and they walked up to us because they're interested, they see people. Normally it means that, they're going to get cake or whatever, but they're only going to get about 20 feet away. And at that point, you walk up to them and they scatter. They spread like chickens. So yeah, this thing is way back there. It's a ranch it's a piece of property that's always being monitored by the sheriffs. It's a busy highway that goes out to a really busy refinery that employs like half the town. There's constantly people on that road. You're going to be seen if you're out there, and to do it like way back in the back, I just don't feel like there's any element of a hoax, That was kind of the weird part about it.
Jeremy, you've met Gabe Valdez, right? The sheriff near Dulce Base, who's investigated a lot of these firsthand. And did he have anything to say that was kind of groundbreaking?
Well, I mean, for me, it was one of the first interviews that I ever did. And it was just an audio interview. And it was, way back before I started doing anything like this. And I was just curious. And it was the last interview he did before he died. So I kind of like think, wow, that's a special. It was 4 hours. It's just audio. I just haven't gone into it. But he showed me books and books and told me all about everything, that every scientific test they did for decades, all the strange stuff he saw. At that point in his life, he was not only either convinced, but he was like trying to convince me all of it was government. All of it. Like he had just decided all of it was government. It was easier for him to think of it that way. It didn't add up when he was talking about it. He didn't have the right answers for that, but he was trying to convince me that it was all government testing. The simple answer is, if you have tons of land and you've got tons of money and you want to study like biological stuff for our United States military, you buy your own cows. You don't sneak on in secret Delta teams and UFOs and drop down and disembowel cows and do all this stuff and then place them daintily back right where the farmer's going to find them. I mean, it just makes no sense. The mystery is bigger than that. So that was a cool interview because it also taught me that over time, people can try to convince themselves that the evidence adds up to something when it just doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. Any misconceptions like that you want to set the record straight on, or any final thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I'd like to hear Adam's final thoughts in the 6 minutes we have. What I will just say is we should do it again and kind of go deeper into some of what Adam has been telling you. But for this one, look, I could go all day. We could pull up a mean tweets about fake stuff that's said about me and go through it. It would be a waste of all of our time. No, I don't work for the government. No, I don't have one source. No, the government's not leaking me this. No, I'm not part of some disinfo campaign. No, I'm not making $1 billion off everything I'm doing. This is a passion project. I make my money off of real estate. I literally do fix pipes and plumbing for a living the majority of the time, as well as drywall, and I can do kitchen and cabinetry and carpentry. Anyway.
Can you walk on those stilts, the drywall stilts? Can you walk on those?
I would not trust myself. That's the one thing I would not do. Yeah. But even my martial arts experience has not taught me how to do that. What I'd like people to know, if they're listening to your podcast, they're interested in it, is like, I am genuinely interested in this. I really have a fascination for the unknown, the UFO subject. I feel very grateful I've been able to bring things forward to add to the database of actual physical evidence, the actual visual videos from within, our military. Look, man, I'm grateful to be able to put those out. I've got a lot more to do with that. I will be putting it a lot more on my terms, on my time, just because I need to vet everything. But just know that rather than going online and being upset about stuff, go do something. Go validate that last video that I released from the deck of the USS Omaha, because it is from the deck and it's from the Viper team. I'm not going to ask them. You got to ask them. It doesn't matter if I ask them. So I'd encourage everybody to get involved in some way. It's cool when you find a mutilated cow like Adam and there's a doorway into the unknown, but everybody can get involved. And so it's like, you guys are doing a podcast, you're contributing. I would encourage people to get involved and not just express their disdain for it not being good enough. That would be my final thought, and I'd love to hear Adam's.
Okay. Yeah, Adam. What do you think about it? Because you also represent a lot of us, who aren't filmmakers or in the media. You're just a stand-up guy, and what do you think about all this stuff?
Well, speaking on behalf of everybody who's not you,
yeah, it is. Who looks into this stuff as a pseudo profession of sorts, but who has experienced it firsthand.
I just think that no matter what you believe, I don't think there's anything wrong with curiosity. And I think that really it's the spice of life. There's so much out there that's perfectly explainable that we just don't know yet. We don't know what the bottom of the ocean looks like. Hardly any of it, right?
Yeah.
There's all these things. Everybody thinks the age of discovery has been over since like the 50s or something, right? But no, that's just not true. And I think it's a really exciting time to be alive. If you're willing to just kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit, maybe that one that you've just thought yourself too busy or too just wrapped up in the mundane parts of life that you have to do. You have things that you have to do to survive and succeed and stuff like that. But, let your mind wander when you don't have to think about that stuff. I think there's just more to look forward to. What am I going to learn about today? These types of things. Don't hem yourself in with that can't be true, so I'm not going to pay any attention to what that guy has to say about it type of thing. You're missing part of the point if you do that, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. And I've said that on the show too. I can understand why people focus on their day-to-day and the mundane stuff, because that's what we all have to do. But you should start paying attention, because the world opens up, the universe opens up to you when you start paying attention.
You might even wake up one day and, you're friends with some influencer like Jeremy Corbell,
Exactly right.
Yeah, look, it's a real pleasure, you guys. I am a fan of your podcast. It was a no-brainer when Adam asked me. Sometimes it takes a friend to ask me to do something, but as long as he was coming on, the dead cow brought us together, but we become good friends, and that's not going away. And so, if nothing else, exploring these mysteries together, it brings us closer and a lot. We learn a lot about each other. He really does have one of the best sense of humor anybody I ever met. It's a pleasure, you guys. And I really, maybe to your audience, who are probably not the people on Twitter that are just sending garbage. Your audience seems like a great audience. They're listening to you guys and they're interested in the unknown. So I'd recommend your audience become just proactive. If they want to see this happening more, support your podcast, make sure to do some work to contribute something. And I think that it engages people. We get to know each other. It's a community of people who are interested. And I think that's important.
And where can our audience find, if they want to get access to this stuff that you're vetting so thoroughly, where do they need to go?
Everything is at Jeremy Corbell. My wife says I'm too findable. They can message me through there. Just look at everything's at Jeremy Corbell. Okay. And, hopefully if I do my job right, you'll see it on the news and you'll see it in TV shows and just trying to get it out there so people can engage this information. So that's what I'd say.
Just the two names, not the four names.
Yeah, just the two names. I can't even stumble on the four names. That's it. But hey, my friends and enemies call me four names. So if that's easier for you.
Okay. So noted. Well, thank you so much. It's been a tremendous pleasure. And we're going to have you all back.
Great. Adam and I got more to talk about because he doesn't even know yet some of the stuff of the scientific analysis. So I'd like to talk with him about that. And, how better to do it than have you guys there championing that.
Hey, yeah. And listen, anytime you want to talk about a new release or you got something, because I know you must have a billion things in the pipeline that's going to be coming out for years or whatever, you're welcome back anytime.
As long as Adam's here, I'll be here.
Okay. That sounds great.
Absolutely. Yep.
Something's wrong with this guy.
Thank you, brothers. All right.
That's going to wrap up this episode with Jeremy Corbell. A special thanks to both Jeremy and Adam for joining us tonight. You can follow Jeremy at his YouTube channel or at extraordinarybeliefs.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new show.
Please remember to support our sponsors. They help keep the show free and the lights on in Blanket Fortiana.
Special thanks to John Bolin.
To use my voice,
Gray.
To use my voice, RODS.
Approval to use my voice recording.
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.